Okay, so the next server software we want to look at is SSHD. Now, SSHD has config files, and these config files, okay, are located under etc SSH / SSH config or SSHD. It is common for many network systems to have two config files. One is for the client and one is for the server. So SSHD is the server config. Okay, what level of encryption are you okay with using? What port would you like to listen on? Whereas SSH config is going to give default to the client side program like SSH itself. So what should be the defaults? So let's talk about how we can use SSH without having to use a password. Because notice that I logged into Vicky's computer, right? I issued this command. I know I have a student account, and I am prompted with a password. Being prompted with a password is usually not a big deal because we expect people to know their passwords. But what if I wanted to maybe have a backup run automatically to Vicky's computer? If I said in a shell script, SSH, the shell script will be prompted with a password. Not impossible to actually have automatically typed in passwords. There is a command called expect, and you can use it to actually mimic what a user would do. But you can actually establish trust relationships with SSH. And that's done by first creating your own identity. So I am going to attempt to log into Vicky's computer without using a password. First of all, my identity that I'm using is a root on my local system, right? So as a root on my local system, I have to create an SSH fingerprint file, and that's done by saying SSH-keygen, and then you can choose either the RSA or DSA formats or encryptions. Okay, enter file in which to store. I'll take the default. I'll just press enter, and no password for this, and it randomizes things. And so now under .ssh, it creates two files. Three files, two files of interest. One is the public key, and one is the private key. Okay, so all I need to do now is I need to take my public key and I need to put it on Vicky's computer. Okay, I can do it in a couple of ways. The easiest way is to say, go ahead and copy my ID RSA file, whoops, from SSH directory, and copy it onto student at 172.222.04.220, right? So I'm going to copy it automatically on Vicky's computer as student under this IP, and then it has to go into the .ssh directory, and it has to be called authorized keys. So you can put multiple keys there. And I need to now type in the password. SCP is going to ask me for a password. And so what I did is, well, it didn't work as well. What it attempted to do is it attempted to copy the file. It wasn't able to do that because the directory, probably SSH, doesn't actually exist. So let's build it. Student, and I don't have the .ssh. So make directory .ssh, and now if I rerun this command, it works. Okay, now what we try to do is we try to avoid having to type in the password. Let's run it. Let's see, it still is asking for password. Let's see. Well, let me log in and see what happened here. Student .ssh. Did I misspell it? Is that right? Authorized keys. Okay. And that's what it looks like. Oh, I see. I bet this is because it's unable to verify the host computer. It's unable to verify the host. See, if we were actually using, DNS server, where these computers would know their names, that would have been fine. But this right here is not resolved. So let's try this. I think if I edit that file and I put my IP here instead of just the name, that's a long shot, but let's try it. Okay, and let's try this now. Still no go. All right. Let's do this. Vicky, I'm going to need you to help with this particular piece. Could you log in as root on your computer? And what we'll do is we'll create a host file. In the host file, we'll resolve to my IP address. We'll resolve the my first name. So go ahead and type in vi /etc/hosts and enter. Just the file, enter. Okay, and now go ahead and go to the bottom of the file and press O, the letter O. All right, let's do escape. Right here. And now O, letter O, no, that's letter 0. No, there you go. And now go ahead and type in SZYMON, and then space, and then the IP address of 172.22.204.220. And now escape. Sorry, not 220, 137. X3, there you go. Yeah. Perfect, and I'll save that. All right. Okay. So we run it, and it still is asking. Okay. Let me show you how this would normally work. If I say SSH to my username at say SSH at root at localhost like this, it'll ask for the password. But now let's see. If I was to go to .ssh and we're going to copy ID, public key, and we'll call it authorized keys. I should be able to issue now. All right. So with a little bit of difficulty, because these servers are all sensitive to the network names, we weren't able to get this working with Vicky's computer. But locally, you see, I issued the SSH command to log in as root. The first time it asked me for a password, right? The above command. But now, the second time, it let me log in without putting the password in, because I established a trust relationship between my local system and the server that's now accepting the request. And so it has to do with .ssh and then having an authorized keys file connected with with a public key. So this is my private key, and this is my public key. And the public key is then distributed to multiple servers, so I don't have to use my password. All right. Okay, that's SSH. And again, with SSH, we can use an SCP command just as well as the SSH command to log in. So at this point, let's make something else work. Let's go ahead and enable an FTP server. Okay, FTP. So FTP can be enabled in a couple of ways. There is an XINetD system on Red Hat, which is an older system, which was supposed to put together a number of servers together. Let's instead use the VS FTP, which is the very secure FTP system. Let's see if it's installed. If I go to init.d and go to VS, nothing is here. So I'll say yum install VS FTPD. And we'll say OK to that. All right, this is going to be done momentarily. Okay, so now I can go ahead and issue etc init.d vs ftpd start. To test it, I can issue something like ftp localhost, and it's asking for a username. Let's go with my regular username and then my password. And now I can see all the files that are in my user's directory. Well, let's see how this translates to what you would normally see on the Windows host with FTP enabled. I will copy my IP address, go to computer, and here I can say FTP, provide the IP address name, press enter, and it's connecting me automatically to the public directory that I have configured so far. So it's a default configuration vs FTP. But I can right click and say login as, provide my username, and now I can see all those files that I have in my local directory. So if I was to look at my local file directory, and maybe look at my home, right? These are all the same files. My.zip would be, let's see, my.zip. And I can delete, because FTP is read and write, I can delete that, and it's going to disappear from here as well. So I'm connected now via the Windows FTP client onto the server. Oftentimes, this is how web developers access web pages. You make a change in the FTP window, and automatically it appears on the web server. All right, let's take a look at the config file. In the config file here, let's quit. It's under vi etc vsftpd, and then vsftpd.com. Here's where I can enable or disable whether this anonymous or that public folder is available. All right. I can also select defaults of what will be the permissions for the files that are left. And let's see. We also can select all the users that are allowed to use our FTP server. Okay. All right, let's try another server. Let's now try a Windows share. A Windows share. So I'll go ahead and use the system config Samba, and they really want me to do that from here, system config Samba. All right, and so with the Samba server, you create Windows shares. So we'll go ahead and create a new share, and the folder for this, I will go ahead and select as maybe the see. Let's have the same one as we use for FTP. So we'll show how the same thing works. So we'll use /home and /myuser. Make it writable, make it visible, and now we'll say OK. The next thing that we need to do, oh, that's fine. Temporarily, I'll give it to this user. The next thing I need to do is I need to actually create users. Notice that the users on the Samba server are different than the operating system users. Just like last week when we created the VNC password, it was independent of all the other users. So I can say add user, and the Unix match, okay, we select, but here is where we select, and I'll call this Windows user. I'll give it a password. Okay, so now that I have this user selected, I can go ahead and give it access to this share. All right, we save this, and now we have to restart Samba, SMB restart. Now we go to our Windows system, and we say something like map and network drive. Now we'll provide the IP address and then the share name, and we will say map it. All right, so things are happening here, and it's asking us to log in. I have to log in with Windows user. That's the user that I created for the Samba server, and I'll put a password in. I say OK. I didn't like that. Did I? No. Say it again.
Is it still tied? The way that I'm understanding this is it has a Samba user and it ties the Samba user to a real system user.
It does, yes, for permissions.
Right.
Yeah.
So you still want it as your student or whatever that whatever account doesn't have root access, right?
Yes, you could do that. Yeah. Windows user. Okay, that's what I did. Windows user, okay. Let's change the password. Maybe it's too easy. All right, so this allowed me to map the drive. So now I have a Z drive. You see there's a Z drive right here. And it takes me to the same directory as I was looking at a moment ago, both via the FTP service. Let's change this to list. Both via the FTP service, and now I have this, right, same directories. Okay, so we connected via a Windows share, we connected via FTP, and let's look at where these config files are at. Etsy, Samba users is going to have the usernames, Then there is smb.conf, which is the actual config file for the Samba server. So this is where the different, oh, you know, probably what I did wrong here is that I can see that my home directories are automatically matched because I created that share with my username. I think what is expecting then the operating system user maybe to be entered. That's probably what happened. But this is the share that we created. So you can have as many Windows shares as you need to have, and you know, it basically mimics what a Windows server would do in terms of file share. But obviously you can share printers as well. Okay. Okay, so with this in place, let's look at yet another server. Let's look at NFS. So whereas Samba is more of an integration with Windows, NFS is sort of a core Unix server, and it's used to share file systems. Let's say that you would like to run a distributed database. You would like to run a database on 3 or 4 computers at the same time. You need to somehow provide access to the same data files for these databases to run from. And so NFS is sometimes used to do that. All right, to configure NFS, we can go ahead and look for a config. Okay, so we'll start with that, NFS. And so here, just like in Samba, we're going to first create a share. I'll create a share here under /var www html. So this is going to be the directory that I'll be sharing. And I can specify whether I would like to share it with a specific host or I can share it with any host. So that's where the security is set on NFS. You don't have a username to log in with, but you can specify only this, excuse me, only this server can use this. So for now, I'll type in here localhost, and I'll say read and write. Okay, so a share is created. Now I'll go ahead and close the config and restart my NFS server. NFS restart. All right, so now I like to mount. I like to use my server, and I can do that by creating make directory NFS, and now mount, type NFS, mount what? Mount from localhost, and localhost to NFS. Let's see if that works. Okay, so let's look at the exports file. So I think I have to specify here var www html like this. Okay, so notice what happened. Inside of my NFS directory, I now have all the files that are on my web server. If you have your system available right now, what I will do is I'll modify my exports so that it'll allow mounting of this from any directory in read-write mode. Okay, go ahead and issue the following command. Well, first of all, create yourself a directory, any directory at all, and then issue mount-t, replace localhost with my IP address. So you'll say something like, you'll say mount of type NFS from 172.22.204.137 var www html. Okay, see if that might work for you. And as you are doing that, you can then manipulate my website. I'm going to delete everything from my website right now, and I'll create a file, index.html. Okay. So if I go back to my server here, it's an empty page. So whoever has been successfully able to access my system, go ahead and edit this file and put your name in it. Anybody who was successfully able to mount the system? All right, so let me refresh the page. No, not yet. All right. Did you, okay, so you mounted it correctly. Go ahead and type in ls. Yeah, enter. Okay, so you have to go inside of the NFS directory. So cd NFS, capital NFS. Yeah, and now ls. All right, and now vi on the index page. Yeah, enter, and go ahead and put some text in here. Yep. Okay. Try the colon W and enter. Do that again. Colon W and then exclamation point. Exclamation. Yeah. All right. So. All right. So here's Vicky's page, and so here's what happened. Victoria mapped or mounted my NFS export directory, and then she manipulated the file on her system, and so then when I refreshed it through Apache, right, obviously her changes appeared. So that's why here the page appears. Okay, any questions about NFS? And so NFS is managed here by etc exports, and read and write. You can expose directories in read-only mode if you wanted to. And there are very many other operators can put in for whether this is a hard mount, a soft mount, and how the caching even takes place, and how the files are overwritten. Okay, so at this point, let's look at the Telnet system. And now I should be able to go to etc xinetd. Let's see, xinetd, and I have to install Telnet apparently. So let's look at Telnet, and we'll say yum install telnet-server. So hopefully by now you see sort of a pattern of these network services. You first have to install the service, then you start it, then you configure it, and then you restart it for the config to take place. All right, so now that Telnet is installing, I can now go to etc xinetd, and now I have a Telnet file here. And the xinetd wrapper, it's a service wrapper, has sort of a backwards logic. They have the disable statement equals yes. Okay, so to enable it, you have to set that to no, right? So we'll say no save, and I should be able to restart. I'm not restarting Telnet, but I have to restart the wrapper that Telnet is actually registered in by saying restart like this. So now from your computer, you should be able to issue Telnet 172.222.04.137, and it's going to ask you it's student, password student. Okay, so Telnet, similar to SSH, of course not encrypted, allows you to configure the service and to go ahead and launch it. All right, there's a command that allows you to watch the traffic. It's called TCP dump. Okay, and if you say something like this, interface any, it's going to show you the entire traffic as it travels to your interface. So as you are accessing this through Telnet, okay, your password actually will be visible or my password in this instance for the user student would be visible in clear text. There is another program called Wireshark that has a nice GUI to it that you can install, and you can see similar activity. But it basically displays every packet that's coming through. Okay, so that's Telnet. Next, I want to talk about one more server, and that's the X server. We talked about the X Windows server in the past, and the X server, of course, is just the capital X. That's the name of the system. Its config file is under etc x11, and then x org, okay. X or conf, where whether you have a keyboard or other elements, they will be configured through here. So let me just do this. Go inside. And let's see. Okay, so this is a typical stanza in a config for X server. Basically, you have a starting and ending of a section, and then inside you specify what is the resource. You can specify the resolution for your monitor and other elements, and that's how you configure the X server itself. Okay. Last week I also showed you VNC, so you just issue VNC server, and then you set the password for the VNC server. I think I did that for a student here, and it's going to run VNC. I can then say File, New Tab, and use VNC Viewer. And then VNC Viewer is going to ask for the local password that I created earlier. I think we set that to student as well. Let's see. Maybe it's lowercase welcome. There it is. Okay, so that's an example here of a screen grabbing or screen display, screen scraping server. VNC server has a number of config files. If you start VNC as a regular user, limited user, there is a file under .vnc, and inside of this .vnc, you can store a file with the default clients that would kick in whenever you start your VNC server. So in my instance, it's the entire desktop that starts up, but I could have only the text editor or only the terminal that actually starts up. Okay, all right, so that's what I wanted to show you in terms of the presentation. Let me stop this.